we have Christina here.
Hi, how are you?
I'm good. So I just told people that together we are going to share some practical stuff, practical tactics about building B2B communities and building brand community actually for the B2B space, which I have to admit that it's quite a struggle for me as well at Social Insider. And I hope that after this live session, we can define what brand community means and bring some clarifications that brand community doesn't mean managing a group on different platforms. And I hope we can share tactics and learn from what you do. Before to jump in, I want to share some things about Christina. Christina is a fractional chief customer officer and community strategist who helps B2B brands building community and lasting customer relationship. Her insights are featured in HubSpot Academy, Forbes, and Adweek. She's also author of Transforming Customer Brand Relationship. So I think you are the right person to ask how can we build brand communities, especially nowadays when after the pandemic, and it seems that it was a time when everyone was online, and now there is a mix with offline and online, and it's better to use this mix to build a brand for the person that you are targeting. So some details about this live session will be around 40 minutes. You can ask us questions anytime. And before we jump in and discuss all this stuff about branding, about communities, share with us if you are an in-house social media managers or you are working on the agency side, just to make sure that we are tailoring the insights based on what you need. So yeah, the first question for you, Christina, is I know you built communities for both B2C and B2B brands. What's the biggest misconception B2B companies have about community building?
That if you build it, they will come.
Mm-hmm.
They really think if you just create a Slack channel or a circle, or it's very similar to social. If you create an account and you start posting, that's going to be enough. And there is this lack of intentionality. They really think if they just create a place, people are just going to flock to it without really thinking about why would someone want to join? What's in it for them? How can you create an experience that is different from everything else? Because like you mentioned, the pandemic, we saw this buzz around the word community. And so we were seeing more and more communities pop up here and there, but they weren't done intentionally. It was very much like riding the wave. And so there was no differentiation. There was nothing that made people stand out. And so you saw a lot of companies go very hard on community, and then like 1 or 2 years later, they're already dismissing it. They've laid off a lot of the teams. And it's because they did not come from a place of we truly believe in community. It came from a place of we need to ride the wave. And you can see that with how it wound up being executed and finished in the end.
Okay, so I think this is happening as well when building a product. So just build it.
Yeah.
I think
Yeah.
it's translated in other marketing areas. If you don't know who we are targeting, what are their pains and gains, they wouldn't come to you. They wouldn't choose your product in our case, or they wouldn't follow you on as a brand on social or subscribe to newsletter and so on. Many B2B leaders think communities are just nice to haves. How do you make the business case for community investment?
So it comes from a lot of places. The first thing is that, especially with the economic conditions that we're seeing globally, but also in the United States, everything has to prevent itself from being a cost center. So a lot of brands that are doing community, they start with community as a support function, because that way they can say we're reducing labor cost, or we're reducing time spent on tickets, or all of these things. And then they can tie that to retention. So they're trying to tie community into those business impacts so that they can say, like, see, this isn't a cost center, this is actually helping. The problem with that is that that scratches the surface of what community can actually provide. A lot of times when we talk about community, we're talking about, I'm going to put all these customers in one place, and then we'll have a couple internal people taking care of them, and that's the community. There's so much more that community can do if you actually let it kind of flourish and become its true self. For example, if your CEO is on LinkedIn talking about how great community is, but they are not in the community and spending any time in the community that the company actually has built, then that's just broetry on LinkedIn. That's just a post. That's just riding the trend. The beauty of community is that it's a silo killer. So you don't just have your customers in one place, you can have your entire company in that community too. So that you have employee to employee talking, you have employee to customer talking, you have customer to customer talking. And so it removes all of these silos that are actually preventing your team from not only talking to your customer, but talking to each other. And so if you look at it from that perspective, that becomes a tool for visibility. That becomes a tool for collaboration. That becomes a tool for product improvement. That becomes a tool for support. That becomes a tool for retention. That becomes a tool for essentially like additional revenue. Maybe there's people in the community that are pitching a new feature that's going to drive more business or is going to increase your TAM. But you don't know if you're not in the room, like actually diving into seeing what people are talking about. And so I like to look at it from like base layer. So like what's the bare minimum this community can do that I know the CEO will care about, and then build up as to like what are all the different opportunities that community can build. Because I'll be honest, there's a lot of people who have not fully tapped into what community is actually capable of. They really kind of scratch the surface with the support level, and then they never transcend that.
Yeah, yeah. How would you define community for a brand? I think you mentioned that you can start with something basic, just to have a MVP to showcase to the manager or to the CEO that it's working, and then to move forward and invest more resources and bring more people, as you said, from the C-level, from customers, and from people who usually are more in the communication team. What community means actually for a brand?
For me, I like to say that community is relationships at scale. So if you want to have a closer relationship with your customer base, community is the answer to that. It's going to help you build that over time. It's going to give you an opportunity and a place for you to create those rituals, to create those micro moments, to actually build a true relationship human to human with your customer base. And so that's how I like to see community utilized. When we're thinking about what that could look like, though, I think that we go from 0 to 60 way too fast. We immediately think I'm going to make this massive community and we're going to have 100,000 people in there. It's going to drive new business. It's going to create advocacy. Like we go from 0 to 60 instead of, do you have a cab? Like I've had people try to hire me and say like, we need you to build a community. And usually my first question is, do you have a customer advisory board? Do you have a cab? Because if you don't have a cab, but you want a whole community, I'm going to ask you to build a cab first. Because a cab is going to be, it's going to give you an opportunity to tap into the customers who already want to work with you. It's going to be able to highlight what a community can do on a micro level. And it's going to be small enough that you can really test, you can play with some things, you can experiment, you can have those one-on-one conversations, you can have the CEO pop in for like a quarterly call and it isn't going to take too much of their time. Build a cab first. Don't start with this whole community. I think that really puts the cart before the horse, as people would say, because you're getting way too advanced. You need to start small and then build. And that's going to create momentum for you. It's going to give you a lot of learnings. It's going to give you a safe space where you can beta test. And it's also going to make the people who want to work with you immediately feel like they're involved in the process, because now that cab can be a part of building this community because they already want to give you feedback. They already want to talk to you and say like, all right, cool. If this is, what do you like about this experience? What do you like of this experience that you would like to see on a bigger scale? If we were to invite other customers into this community, who should we invite? What should the experience look like? What was onboarding like for you? What kind of conversations do you want to see here? And that way the cab is something small, but you get the voice of the customer as you build. So they get to be a part, like an intrinsic part of building this bigger community. That for me is huge.
Does this cab have a space for itself? I can share that we use intercom, so most of the conversations are happening on intercom, and some other conversations are happening through emails, and then they can do some feature requests in some product tool that we use. But where should we move them to expand this relationship? Should we keep in these tools that we already use, or should we move them to another tool?
It really depends on who's in the room and who you're talking to. So the thing is that like I've used basically every single community tool, and the tool that you think will work isn't necessary, even though it like checks all the bells and whistles, it's top shelf, it's all these things, you'll still wind up going to like a Slack. And it has nothing to do with Slack being like better or worse than the other product. It's if the majority, let's say you have 10 cab members and they are already a part of like other Slacks because of this, because of their work and because of other communities they're in, then having them have a space for you in a place where they're already going to have that tab open, they're already going to have that app on their app on their phone. That way you're creating a space for them to all come together. It's very easy. Slack's also really highly intuitive, so there's not a big learning curve. So the best advice I could give you would be like Slack is usually going to be the answer, but not always. But I would interview the people that are in that group and say like, hey, if we were to have a centralized location for this, so it's easier for not only for us to talk to you, but for y'all to talk to each other, because that's what you really need to give is it's not your connection to us, it's the connection to all of us, to every other cab member. If you have questions, because now you're creating a peer group. It isn't just the connection to the brand. It's how you're able to build those bridges across each other. That's the extra layer. That's the when you see community really start accelerating is when you connect each other. And so ask them, if we were to do a Slack, would that work for you? If it wouldn't work for you, why? And it could be like, I hate Slack. It could be, I don't use it. It could be, my company uses Teams. Like, it could be, I don't want another community to be a part of. Like, but give them the opportunity to say what's going to work best for them, and then see if there's a common thread. See if there's like an opportunity, and be very clear as to like why it's beneficial to have one place. I find that a lot of people will just announce things, but they don't announce the what's in it for you. Like, why should you care? And I think in our messaging for brands, whether it's community or otherwise, we need to do a better job of talking to our customers and letting them know why they should care. Because that's why you get emails that look like press releases, but with like a picture and a CTA instead of like, here's the press person. We've really messed up our messaging when it comes down to how do we talk to people, because we don't tell them why they should care. We just ask them to.
Yeah, yeah. So this is the first thing that we should do when starting a B2B community from scratch, creating this CAP community. What's next? So once we have this and we have some customers, should we expand and getting similar people to this community?
So it really depends. Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, or should we keep or just keeping with the existing customers that we have?
So I would start with the cab, and these are going to be like power users. They're going to be people of like different levels of access. So you might want to have leadership, you might want to have practitioners, whatever that looks like. And depending on what your C-suite and what your goals are, your cab might be a lot of C-suite people who are decision makers, but they actually aren't in the trenches doing the work. If that's what your cab is, which for most companies, that's what the cab is, because they want shiny titles, they want people that they can promote and say, this is our cab. If that's what your team did, then the next thing I want you to do is I want you to create another group, but it's going to be for power users. They probably don't have the sexiest title, but they're doing all the work. They're in that tool. They know your features better than anybody. They know all the things. So it really depends on who's in the cab. And then where's the opportunity? Where's the gap? And so you go from like thought leaders and decision makers, and now we go to practitioners. We go to the people who are in the trenches that are doing the work, that have all this knowledge. And then go from, all right, well, what does that look like? And then use them as bases to figure out what their needs are on like a scaled version. So for example, If you look at our brand, let's say it's a SaaS brand, do you get the help you need? Are there tutorials that are missing? What are the biggest questions that you have? When you talk to other people about the brand, what are the objections or what are the things that you hear about? Because that's going to let you know like what's missing. So it could be like, hey, I love your product, but when something goes down, I can't get in touch with support. Okay, well, that's going to be huge. Or, hey, I love your product and it's pretty intuitive, but there's a couple things that I literally have no idea how to do. Cool. That's a tutorial opportunity. That's an opportunity for you to create videos or walkthroughs or whatever that looks like. And so figuring out what is the need and what is the need from each other to pay attention to, like when you get these groups together and they're not talking to you, but they're talking to each other, what are they talking about? Are they asking questions? One of the things that's really interesting is leadership needs peer groups. There's a lot of like paid communities specifically for leaders, and it has nothing to do with like they're great, they're shiny, they have all these things. What they actually do is they put leadership with their peers so that they know that that person's not going to try to get promoted. That person's not going to try to sell them something. That person has been where they've been, they have experiences. And then what you'll see is they ask each other questions that they would never put on Reddit, that they'd never put on LinkedIn. They have a safe space that they can then learn from their peers. And so look at the questions that they're asking each other. Is that an opportunity for you to create thought leadership? Is that an opportunity for a course? Is that an opportunity to highlight them and say, like, hey, these are really good questions. Are these the kind of things that you were concerned about when you were working on your career? Is that something that you would be interested in doing a webinar on or a course or something like that in the future so that people can learn from your experience? But pay attention to like how they're showing up for each other and how they're defining what their needs are, because a lot of times what they say they need and how they behave in the community are not necessarily the same thing. So you have to look at both. What are they asking for, and then what are they actually behaving like? What are their needs saying through their actions?
Yeah, yeah. Okay. So, how do you activate these community people? Let's say things are happening in their life, and sometimes they just, I think overall in social media right now, we are entering in the era of lurking and just viewing the content and not engaging anymore. So, building a community, it has this risk as well. How can we motivate them, or how can we activate them to be engaged and, as you said, to ask questions?
So you need to come from a place of emotional intelligence. So we talk a lot in the community space about passive or lurkers, passive people who are basically in the community and they're reading everything, but they're not necessarily participating. They're not necessarily bringing forth like what they have to say to the table. There's going to be people that no matter what you do are going to continue to be passive or lurkers. Like that is just their MO. That's just who they are online. They never post. They are always like looking, things like that. For the rest of them that can convert, you need to be very thoughtful and think, is there psychological safety for them to speak up? Why are they not speaking up? So it could be, let's say going back to the cab and let's say it's all C-suite. Maybe one of those people, they're in the C-suite and this is their first job as an executive. And so they see themselves as like the lowest on the totem pole out of everyone else in the group. So they don't want to say anything because they're like, oh, what if I ask a dumb question? Or what if I say something that someone disagrees with or thinks is wrong? There's a lot of self-rejection when it comes to lurkers. They don't want to put themselves out there because they don't want to be perceived as stupid or dumb or anything like that. And so you'll even see this with people who do post. Like they'll preface their question with, this might be a dumb question, comma, and then the question, because they're saying it's a dumb question before someone else has a chance to. They're basically self-rejecting. They're admonishing themselves before, so no one else gets a chance. Things like that. So coming from a place of emotional intelligence and asking, have we created a space where people feel like if they ask a question or they say something, but someone disagrees, that this is a safe space for them to do that? Because if you haven't created that psychological safety, then you haven't given them a place where they feel comfortable to say something, and then you can't be surprised that they won't say anything then. So it really comes down to emotional intelligence and also understanding, like you said before, like they're doing all these things, they have all this other stuff, they have lives, they have jobs, they have all of this other minutia in their life. A lot of times we act like the only competitor that we have as brands are our competitive brands. That's not true.
Yeah.
It's It's the concert tickets that they want to buy that's going to change their budget for the month. It's their sick child that they can't give you 100% because they're on the hold right now trying to get a doctor's appointment. It's the bill that they didn't see coming. They're worried. Like, there's so many people who are worried about selling and they're like, someone won't return my email. It's like, that person's probably afraid they're going to get laid off. Like, we have so many like microstorms in our own brain of all the things that we're handling and tackling and juggling. And then we are thinking the only thing that we're competing against is our competitor. No, you're competing against that entire person's life. And so you need to provide an experience that feels like a safe space from that. If you are part of a community, like imagine you're having a bad day at work, but then a friend texts you and is like, hey, do you want to go out for drinks or go out for pizza or just want to talk or whatever? And then you get to hang out with them. They don't ask you for any favors. They're not trying to sell you something. They're just like want to spend time with you. It feels like a break. It feels like a respite from the chaos of your life. If you want to build a community, it needs to be an oasis for people. It needs to feel safe. It needs to feel like I want to escape the other things that are taking my attention, because this is something that's not going to try to get me. That's not trying to try to sell me something. That's not trying to try to make me feel dumb. That is really what we need to start thinking about in terms of how we're building these places.
Okay, that's great. We have to understand their context because, as you said, there are a lot of microstorms. I
Yeah.
this word. And we have to understand the whole picture, not only thinking that they want to switch and moving to another tool. How what metrics actually matter for B2B communities? Is it engagement, or should we, I don't know, just actually listening the conversation and extracting insights from what they are saying?
So it's like a social media channel. It's going to change as it evolves and matures. So when you're just starting off creating an account or creating a community, you're going to focus on what most people would call vanity metrics. It's how many members are in there, how many conversations, and that's kind of about it, because it's so early, you're building the foundation. And then once the foundation is built, then the metrics you're going to care about are going to mature. So then we're talking about engagement. And then we're talking about, okay, well, there's conversations, but what kind of conversations and what's the value of those conversations? And then once the foundational is set up, and then you have the engagement level, then we go into impact. Okay, well, these conversations, there's value, but how did we distill value from that? Is that we got a feature request, or we got a bug fixed, or we have retention numbers are increased, or we have higher revenue or advocacy, whatever that looks like. But you have to come from a place of, you have to build, and the metrics evolve as it matures. And that's another problem too, is people think that if you open the floodgates, you open the doors of the community, you send one newsletter that invites everyone to the community, everyone's going to join, everyone's going to start introducing themselves, everyone's going to start saying hi, and you're going to see this swell of numbers. And that's never how it works, ever. You really have to come from a place of, we have to build, and we're building with these people. So foundation, engagement, impact.
Okay. And how can we turn these people into advocates? So let's say we have some cab members, then we, as you said, we add the people that are really working and really using our tool. And how can we promote these people actually? And how can we make them talk about our tool outside the community?
Yeah. So the first thing I would do is I would set up customer interviews. So either the people that are in the cab or the practitioner cab, or the people who, if you talk to sales, or you talk to marketing, or you talk to support, like, who are the people who always raise their hand? Who are the people who always like your social content first? Who are the people who are the power users when we look at their metrics behind the scenes? Get a list of those people and then set up customer interviews. When I started at HubSpot and I was going to be setting up the advocacy program, Hub Fans, the first thing I did was I asked, like, if you're a HubSpot fan, slide into my DMs. I want to talk to you. And so I set up interviews. And one of the first questions I asked was, I know you love us. I can tell because you do this, 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 this. When was the last time you felt loved in return?
Mm-hmm.
And that is a way for you to really open up how they perceive you, not just how they look at you, but how like they feel you look at back at them. And then they'll tell you what their love language is. So a lot of companies will send a swag box, which is lovely. Like I'm not dissing swag boxes, but they'll stop there and then wonder why people don't love them, why people aren't like screaming their names through the rooftops. It's because that is not necessarily their love language. And nothing's going to hit as hard as the first delight box. That first like SAS hoodie, you keep giving them a Yeti or a hoodie, it's never going to feel as good as that first one. You're never going to hit the same dopamine that you got in the first one. And so you need to know, when was the last time they felt loved by you? And what does that love look like? Because there's some people, like for example, right now, it feels like everyone on LinkedIn wants to be a personal branding person. Like everyone wants to like be an influencer or a creator. Use that as an opportunity. You should start treating your customers like influencers. Do they want to be in a webinar? Do they want to write a blog for you? Do they want to be featured? If you start treating your customers the way you would an influencer, you're going to start taking care of them in ways that are going to build advocates. You're going to make them feel special. And your other customers are going to see that you're treating customers like that, not because of how many followers they have, but because they genuinely use your brand. That is powerful. And that's going to make other customers want to have that same treatment. So they're going to start acting like they want to work with you. They're going to reach out. Maybe they'll start posting about you on social, hoping that they'll get your eye, but you're conditioning that behavior. And so I find that a lot of brands, they ignore the people who love them. They absolutely ignore them. They only respond when someone's like yelling at them on TikTok or is like venting about something on Twitter. So what they'll do is they see social as a support mechanism and they only show up when things are bad, but they're ignoring people who love them. What you're doing when you're doing that is you're conditioning that person to believe that they will only get your attention if they're mad at you, that you'll only respond if it's mean. And so there's a lot of people who love you, and it's kind of like saying I love you, but they don't say it back. That's exactly what's happening when someone talks about how much they love your brand, and then you don't like it, you don't comment, you don't repost, you don't like, all you have to do is do like a little heart in the color of your brand in the comment section. It takes 2 seconds. And that person, if they really love your brand, that's going to make their day. It really
Yeah.
is. They're going to tell people like, oh my God, can you believe that so-and-so like liked my post?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's free.
Most of the time, I think we as brand are more reactive. So
Yes.
we every time we respond, I don't know, the intercom is pop up, so we go to the customer support, go to intercom and answer to those questions. But most of the time, we stay in the reactive mode and we don't ask them about, as you said, about love and why they love us and why they choose our brand instead of other brands. Yeah, it's really inspiring for me as well, because in the beginning, in the SaaS business, I think in the early days, you focus a lot of building the product and understanding the customers, but I didn't have in my this insight of creating a close community from our customer database. I was always looking at creating outside and inviting outside people, so people who are similar in their role or in their jobs with our ideal customer profile, and inviting our customer as well, but not treating them as VIPs, as something special for them, and build for and this use this as a foundation.
Well, that's the thing is what you're saying is, I love what you're saying, but the thing is that like, you have to think about like, what does that look like to potential customers? So if they see how you treat your customers, how you take care of them, how you love them in return, how you treat them like VIPs, then in addition to your pitch and whatever your product or service is, they're going to think, this is what I can expect if I'm a customer. And that is a massive differentiator. Like there's not a lot of brands that are doing that well. A lot of them, they do like the bare minimum, or they'll do an influencer campaign and that will fix everything. And then they ignore their customer base. Like, I think a lot of times people don't have the perspective of, well, how does the customer base actually feel about this? Because I've seen so many like brand PR trips. There'll be people who are spending their hard-earned money on your like makeup or your products, and then they see someone who never uses your product, who doesn't like your product, who probably uses your competitor, get paid to go on this all-inclusive vacation just because of how many followers they have. Meanwhile, you were like, I actually give you my money. Like I actually love your product and you're ignoring me. And so it's such a massive red flag for me. I'm not against influencer marketing. I am against doing influencer marketing, but not taking care of your customers. Like if you treat your customers like transactions, but then you treat influencers who don't care about you at all, like celebrities, and give them the moon and the stars, I have a massive problem with that.
Yeah, true that. How can we integrate community platforms with B2B tools like CRM or customer success platforms?
So it really needs to look at, when we're thinking about our tech stack, we need to look from a place of, I want these to talk to each other, but why do I need them to talk to each other, and what conversations? So if you're looking at your tech stack and you're having to integrate them, how easy are the integrations, and what does the field mapping need to look like? So what conversations do I want intercom to go to Slack, to go to the CRM? Like, what does that look like? And so you really need to build out a plan, like, and be very honest about, this is the data I need, this is the information where it lives, and this is where I need it to go to. And then figuring out what is going to be your single source of truth. It's usually your CRM, but there's tons of brands where they do something else. So figuring out what is going to be the single source of truth, what field mapping do you need, what conversations and data needs to go and where, and why do you need that, and who needs access to it. But you really need to build out that entire plan. So like, you want to build like a Miro board that like really deconstructs every single thing in your tech stack, what data lives where do you need it to talk to, and what that benefit is. I love the idea of community being the central source of truth, but not from a data perspective, but from a place of, this is where all the qualitative data lives. Because I find that companies are really good about getting quantitative data, but they're horrible at getting qualitative. Community is the central source for qualitative, because people are going to go off and talk in paragraphs. They're going to ask all these very like difficult questions that they wouldn't necessarily put in a survey. And so thinking about that and really taking a few steps back to figure out, what do you actually want to know, and what do you want to be able to have those conversations look like, is crucial. It's priceless.
Who should own this community? Is it part of the customer success team, or is it part of the marketing team?
I personally think that it should live under the CEO, and there should be either a chief customer officer or a chief community officer, but I know a lot of brands don't do that, so they tend to put it somewhere. It really usually sits wherever they feel like, either it sits based on budget or head count, or it sits based on what they expect it to do. So for example, if the community lives under marketing, that tells me that you use this as a marketing push. This is for advocacy, this is for word of mouth, this is for whatever. If it lives under support, I immediately know that retention is probably going to be like one of my bigger metrics. And so wherever it sits is usually telling on itself as to what they want that community to do for them. So I don't think it should live in either of those places. I think that everyone should have a seat at the table, but community is the table. But that's not usually how it's set up, because a lot of people don't have a chief customer officer or someone that really oversees the full life cycle of customers.
Yeah. Okay. So um, I think in our case, it's more appropriate to the customer success manager, because as you said, they can see the full life cycle of that customers. They have insights from the customer support, and they can ask the different questions that I would ask if I be there. And I'm more marketing person. So we have a question from Carla, who is asking us, could you give us some example of brands that are building these communities well?
Yes. So probably the best example for me would be Atlassian. Atlassian has a really great community where they've built a central place, a center of excellence is what it's called, where you basically have a hub that has all of the things that you need to know in one place so that you can be successful in the community. A lot of communities don't have this, and it bothers me, but you need to have essentially almost like a lobby where it's like, here's all the information that you need to get. If you have any questions about the community itself, here's what you can do so that you can be successful. And then you can build around that. I think that that's very, very well done. Another that's not B2B, but is more B2C is Sephora. Sephora has a really great community where they've turned their customer base into a influencer channel where you're able to share hair and makeup tutorials, you're able to share reviews, you're able to really kind of showcase your expertise, not because of how many followers you have, but because you are a customer and you've used this product. And so I really love how they do that. Lego has done a really great job when it comes to like product innovation. Lego is probably top tier for this because they've created a space where they know all these people love Legos, but they're also builders. So they're not just wanting to make the kits, they want to bring new things to life. So they have places where you can propose future kits. Like, I wish we had this, I wish we had that. And then the community is able to vote on it and have power. They've democratized like future Legos. Like, if it gets enough votes, then that Lego kit gets to be made. And so you've empowered your entire community base to have a say. So imagine if you were the person that pitched that Lego kit that eventually gets made. You can now go across and it's, I see this with B2B too. You get a feature that you pitched made, it makes your whole life. You're going to tell every single person you've ever met that exists because of you. Like, this was my idea. Like, they listened to me. That's better than any billboard. That's better than any advertisement. It's going to be honest and earnest, and people are going to love that. Like, that's beautiful. I really love that. And I like, look at the product innovation for B2B and for B2C. Like, how are they setting people up to be the brains of the operation and then celebrating them by bringing their ideas to fruition? That's really powerful. I love those examples.
So I think we should do the last questions because we soon will be out of time. So soon you are going to release a book. So right now it can be pre-ordered from Amazon. I'm going to share the link here. Can you tell us a little bit more about the book you are writing?
Yeah, so it's in 3 parts. It's about building customer brand relationships. The first part is the essentials of everything that builds that relationship. So we've talked about community, we've talked about social listening, we've talked about emotional intelligence. All of these things are in the first part of the book. So it talks about behavioral psychology. It talks about that psychological safety that we were talking about. It talks about customer support. It talks about social media, how all of these moving pieces play a role in building the customer relationship, because a lot of brands will put everything in the hands of customer support. Customer support has to fix everything, has to make the relationship. When the customer leaves, it's customer support's fault, even though that person was touched by all of these other things. Maybe they leave because the customers, like, maybe they saw something on social that offended them. There's all of these moving pieces that build that relationship. And so you need all of those things to work together. The second part is community. So, like I said earlier, community is a silo killer. So you have all these moving pieces, but they don't always work together. There's a lot of data that one team has that another team doesn't have. And because of that, they're not able to provide the best customer experience. How can we get them to work together? Community. So the second part is all of these moving pieces and questions you need to ask yourself in order to build that community. How do we get that set up? What does that look like? How does it make it so that we can work together? And a lot of the second book is me talking about feedback over and over and over again. You have to constantly be looking for feedback from your customer base and from your community, because that's where the gold is. And then the third and final part is you've built these relationships. Oh, what happens when it falls apart? What happens if there's a PR crisis? What happens when like AI jumps in, like enters the chat, and now you have all the technology that's impacting these customer relationships? What about change management? All of these things. And so that is the tail end of it. It's like, how do we deal with change management? How do we deal with technological advancements? How does AI play a role in customer experience for better or for worse? And how can we as CX professionals really make sure that we're fostering these relationships that can survive all of these changes. And so basically throughout the whole book, it's how to be human, how to be emotionally intelligent, how to not fight AI and fight technology, but have it be a part of your work so that you can be unapologetically human when you need to be, and then you can be efficient and operationalize things when you need to.
I'm hooked. I'm going to I'm going to buy your book because it's really insightful and it's really helpful to understand how to really build a brand community. It's not easy. I know the example that you gave us. They represent some of the big brands, but I think there are some learnings that we can apply as well as small brands. Christina, where can people find you?
So you can find me on LinkedIn, just search Christina Garnett. I'm there. I'm also on Twitter. If you're still over there in that kind of ragey place, you can find me over there at that Christina G. But also I'm on TikTok, I'm on Instagram. I'm kind of everywhere, but I'm really mainly on Twitter and LinkedIn.
Okay, great. Thank you so much for sharing all these insights and describe how can we build brand communities. And thanks everyone for being with us today. Thank you.
Thanks for having me.